My name is Steve Murphy. This is the Insider Exclusive. We're bringing you the stories behind the headlines, and welcome to our show. You wrote an article about addressing race to the jury as soon as possible, correct?
Yes.
There are assumptions you wrote in that article. What are those assumptions that you'll share with us?
Well, basically, I was talking about black people and white people,
Yes.
and I was talking about cases which appear to have white prejudice directed towards black people.
Yes.
And I said, look, minority communities, particularly the black community, people have been raised with a sense of community.
Yes.
They've had to have a sense of community to survive, to protect themselves. But white people haven't had that problem. We've always been the majority in America, so many of us don't grow up with a sense of community because we didn't have to.
Right.
I also wanted to mention the fact that I think racism exists at both a subconscious and a conscious level.
In everybody.
Yes, many people look in the mirror and say, I'm not racist, I'm
Right.
not prejudiced.
Right.
They don't realize the extent to which they do devalue people they see different from themselves. And sometimes you have to remind them of that in a very, very respectful way, so they will be conscious of it, because we all have subconscious prejudices that we're not even aware of. And I also mentioned that all of us grow up with some kind of prejudice. People who say, I have no prejudice, I've never been exposed to it, are not telling the truth. We all grow up prejudiced. We have to remind ourselves about it every day and do what we can to overcome it.
Have you ever thought about doing something different?
Yes, that's why I went to law school.
Okay.
And when I started, I was going to be a college professor, and I was teaching in universities, and I was just writing a paper, my dissertation on prostitution and police reports, and thought I'd write a book on prostitution, and that's where I was going. I was going to have a sports car and spend my summers in Europe, and that was it. And
Okay.
One day, the little girl needed help, and I let her sleep on my sofa, and over the next 3 years while I was writing my dissertation, over 250 children came through my home.
You're kidding
And they'd
me.
come and they'd go.
And there wasn't
and
even an organization at that time?
No.
You
And
just
they
brought them home?
Well, they called me, and then they were in these situations, and judges couldn't help them, and the police couldn't help them, and then
You must have had some bad experiences with some of these people.
none.
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 None of them robbed you or...
No, I was never robbed. They set up the rules, and they set up all of the policies and procedures, because my house was a place they could come where the pimps wouldn't dare come get them, and where the police would not dare tread.
I grew up on the east side of Los Angeles and lived with the gangs. That community that I grew up in, Highland Park, is still under the siege of gangs. Under the siege of gangs, actually, that my father grew up with.
Yes.
So it's multi-generational, and I don't want any kid to have to grow up in a neighborhood like that one.
Well, let's talk about kids when they go to school. I think it starts from the elementary school.
Right.
A kid sometimes is forced to choose a group just to get to school,
Right.
isn't he?
Yeah. Well, we've seen it happen. I mean, at Markham Middle School in South LA, near the Watts Towers, you could see them from the school, the Watts Towers. I've said that middle school is a government-funded gang recruitment center, because when you show up there, you get a menu as a sixth grader of 7 gangs, and you have to choose one of them, otherwise you will not be safe.
What do you mean you get a menu?
Basically, there are 7 gangs that operate at that school, and if you do not belong to one of them,
Yes.
then you probably will not survive.
So what does a kid do today? I mean, seriously.
I think a kid has to reach out to adults. Hopefully it is their parents.
You came from a background where you thought you would do more good in the prosecutor's office rather than as a criminal defense attorney, because you would have, I guess the right way to say this, more of a heart, more insight into many of the people that get in trouble. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's mostly what it is. I mean, a lot of people focus on the defendants that are in
Yes.
the criminal justice system, and I grew up in my neighborhood wondering why people in my neighborhood didn't have a voice. Why was it difficult for us to contact the police? Why was it difficult for us to have justice? And there's a wider level of disproportionality in the victims that are people of color than there is the people who are prosecuted that are people of color.
Explain that a little bit for our viewers.
Well, a lot of the victims
Yeah.
themselves are in communities that are people of color, and disproportionately so to the rest of society. So in my community, for example, where I grew up, you know, and I saw a lot of crime, and I saw a lot of people doing things that I felt were wrong, that victimized myself, my family, my block, my church groups, and all of those things made me uncomfortable. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it. I wasn't sure how I was going to fit in growing up, but eventually I wanted to be the voice for those people.
Yes.
I wanted people to walk into a courtroom and see me, identify with my background, and say, he speaks for me, he's going to make sure that my community is safe, he's going to make sure that
Right.
what happened to me isn't going to happen again in my community, in my home, on my street.
You said to me that you missed the excitement of the DA's office.
Every day.
Do they call you still to consult on cases, for example?
Yes, I spoke to the DA himself last week, and the unit that I established there,
Which is the sex crimes unit.
crimes unit,
Yes.
now has 40 lawyers, and I talk to the lawyers in that unit almost every week,
Really?
and about current breaking cases that I love to be involved with, and also the phenomenon of cold cases. And I get calls almost every 6 weeks that something I worked on in the 80s that was unsolved, the early 90s, has now, because of DNA technology, been solved. So it's enormously exciting work, both that you can identify with DNA and absolve someone of
Exactly.
guilt.
And speaking of lawyers and speaking of detectives, Tom, you use a lot of detectives, investigators, and you write about them. And your character, Monk, for example, he is an OCD kind of a character.
That's true.
And the detail, I see the similarities here. A great defense attorney is got to know the detail of the case, doesn't he?
No question about it. An investigation is absolutely critical. And it's hard to find good investigators in real life because you have to have not only a very inquisitive mind, very intelligent mind, you've got to be creative, you've got to look to sources to get information that may not be typical, and you have to have people skills because you've got to be able to get people to talk to you and to trust you.
Is that the way you write your
The
characters?
fun
Lee?
of Monk is he has no people skills. We take all of the assumptions you just talked about and completely subvert them. That gives us,
Why is he successful?
that gives us the humor and the drama we're looking for in the show. Is to, of course, the detective must be inquisitive and work well with people and
Right.
be very professional. So you create a detective who's none of those things,
Right.
except inquisitive, and that's where the fun begins.
Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and welcome to the Insider Exclusive. Today we have an unusual show. We're covering aging in America and elder abuse.
The senior population in California is growing, as we all know, as the baby boomers get older. We've passed the legislature in the last several years a number of reforms dealing with nursing homes to make sure they're licensed, adult day health care facilities to make sure that when seniors need companionship during the day, there is somebody there, and those facilities are licensed. We've strengthened all of the protections that are out there, both for the physical, the health, and for financial protection for seniors to make sure that, that all of our loved ones, as they get older, have the protections they need and deserve.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're doing that. Are there housing projects that you're working on in your area, or what?
Oh, sure. There's housing projects all over the state. We just passed a housing bond in November. The projects are trying to accommodate in a way that's hospitable, non-institutional, the influx of seniors that are out there. You know, we're going to see more and more seniors transition out of the single-family homes into more group and assisted living facilities as they get older. We need to build those facilities, and that's happening all over the state.
If you wanted to say one thing to all the seniors in Los Angeles, what would you say?
We're here to help you. You know, there's no reason today that if you're taken advantage of, and if you have a friend or you know a relative or someone who needs assistance, don't be afraid to call, because unfortunately today there's so many people out there preying on seniors.
Yes, yes.
Stealing their identity,
Right.
and also
After
talking
they've
them.
worked so many years hard, good
That's
credit.
right,
Yeah.
and talking them into so many things. Also, we do have the kind of health services for seniors addressing the particular needs in some of our our clinics as well as our hospitals.
Thank you for joining us on the Insider Exclusive. You can see more of these shows at www.insiderexclusive.com. I'm Steve Murphy. I'll see you next time.